To solve this problem, I'll start by adding 1 to both sides of the equation. We want to solve by completing the square, so we want our variable terms to be on one side and the number term to be on the other. Now I have 2x squared minus 2x equals 1, and the 1 is on the right-hand side. Notice that I left a blank space there. Eventually I'm going to be filling in a term when we complete the square. But we're not ready to do that yet because I need to divide both sides of the equation by 2. So the reason for dividing by 2 is that the coefficient of the x squared term is 2. So we need to get that to be a 1. And if I divide every term by 2, and make sure you divide every term by 2, including the right-hand side term. Now I've got x squared minus x equals 1/2 on the right-hand side. Okay, so now I'm ready to add a term to each side of the equation to complete the square. So I look at the x term, and that's a negative x, which is a negative 1x. So that means the value of b in this equation is negative 1. And our formula to complete the square is to take half of b and square it. So half of negative 1 is negative 1/2. If I square that, then I have 1/4. So this is the number that will complete the square. It will give me a perfect square trinomial on the left-hand side. So I add 1/4. It's always going to be adding. We never subtract that last term there. So plus 1/4 on the right-hand side. Now this is a perfect square trinomial, x squared minus 1x plus 1/4. So we'll factor that. Get rid of this. We will factor that by just making one set of parentheses, because since it's a perfect square trinomial, it will be the same factor multiplied by itself. Or we can just write one set of parentheses squared. X squared breaks up into x times x, and 1/4 is 1/2 times 1/2. Notice that that's the 1/2 that we had here inside the parentheses. And since we have a negative here, we'll have a negative here. So now x minus 1/2 quantity squared, that's equal to what we had in the previous step. And you can double check that by foiling what you have here and seeing that it's equal to what we had in the previous step. Equals. Now I want to take the 1/2 plus the 1/4 and add those together, and I get 3/4. And you can do that in your calculator by just taking 1 divided by 2 plus 1 divided by 4, hit math, and then the enter key twice. So you don't have to do that by hand. Now I've got x minus 1/2 quantity squared equals 3/4. So to continue solving this, I will take the square root, of both sides of the equation. And when I do that, on the right-hand side, I'm going to put a plus or minus. So on the left-hand side, the square root and the square cancel out, and I have x minus 1/2. Now on the right side, I have plus or minus the square root of 3/4, and we can rewrite this as plus or minus square root of 3 over the square root of 4, which of course becomes plus or minus. Square root of 3 we can't do anything with, but the square root of 4 is 2. So notice that the 2 is not under the radical. Let's see. The radical is only applying to the 3. The 2 is outside the radical because the radical is only in the numerator there. All right, so now we have x minus 1/2 equals plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. And now I can add 1/2 to both sides. Oops. And add 1/2 to the right side. So my final answer is x equals, and we have the 1/2, and I'm going to write that first because then I can put the plus or minus between the two terms. And then we have square root of 3 over 2. Now on your exam, this is a perfectly good answer. In my math lab, they're going to want you to break this up into 2 solutions. We really do have 2 solutions here because of the plus or minus. So one solution is 1/2 plus square root of 3 over 2. The other solution is 1/2 minus the square root of 3 over 2. So I'll write that out. And that's our solution. So final answer. And that's the end of that problem.